challenge for each of us is to look and see what this thing we're calling consciousness, what does it actually refer to? It's very, very trippy. It's very bizarre. It's very strange what these things are.
Okay.
We're used to thinking we know what they are because we use these words so easily. You know, we can string them together in sentences and talk eruditely about them as if we're making sense. But if we look at what consciousness is, light, vision, thought, you know, these things are unbelievably bizarre and weird and uncapturable when you begin to look at what they actually are.
What are your thoughts about this?
Well, there's different sort of philosophical schemes and different ways of trying to analyze it or deconstruct what this consists of. And in most schools of Buddhism, consciousness is not considered an absolute principle. The absolute principle is typically emptiness or the alaya or the Dharmakaya or something like that, depending on which school of Buddhism you're in.
Something beyond intelligence or consciousness.
Well, this is what they talk about. But all of this is very, in my opinion, very silly. Because in actual fact, all these differentiations aren't actual, they aren't true. They are tricks, they are devices to enable us to try to conceptually deconstruct and look at what this is from new angles to attack materialism or to attack simple-minded views. But in actual fact, you can't find where none of these things exist as separate principles because there's no separation between them. Let's put it this way. Put it this way. Right, yeah, because all there is this.
Yeah, there's no...
This is what there is. And if there's a Dharmakaya, it's this. If there's consciousness, it's this. If there's name and form, it's this. If there's all the different aggregates, it's this. If there's no aggregates, it's this. If there's no time, it's this. If there's time, it's this. If there's space, it's this. So on and so forth. So all these conceptual modes of analysis are just different ways of looking at this. Look directly and see what this is. When is this ever other than this? When is the present moment ever other than this?
When it's not this.
Well, I mean, that's a nice thing to say, but in your experience, you know, when it's now, and you're here, and all that is this. You know, and it always looks different, and you know, than it ever has, and it looks different than itself in the next instant. And you can never say exactly with precision what any of it really is, and yet it's always right here. And you can't say what here means. But, you know, it's always this. And see, and again, it's not the word, it's not the idea of this, it's the fact of
this.
I mean, this is drinking chai, this is talking, this is waving our hands around. I mean, all of these things are actually happening, but they aren't what we say they are. There are no hands waving around, there's no chai being drunk, there is no conversation. Because what it actually is this. And all of those words are approximations that miss the mark, because the mark cannot be hit by ideas. So here we are, what we have is this, period. What we are is this, period. And what we say about it, plus or minus, doesn't add or subtract in iota to this. It's like when you have a dream. You can have conversations with people and they can seem to be meaningful and all that. There's no one there. There's nothing, there's not even anything happening. The dream isn't even really there. And yet it can seem to be there. It can seem to be meaningful. It can seem to have some degree of coherence. And it's all very mysterious why that should be so. Because that's the idea of being asleep, is an idea that exists within the waking state, within the conscious mind. Because within that state is the state where all these differentiations happen. And in sleep, the differentiations don't happen. Things aren't differentiated, so there's just the full fields, but they aren't being differentiated. So the fields don't go away, but they aren't being analyzed, they aren't being modeled, they aren't being named. So sleep could be defined as a state of cessation of naming. But if you look closely, you might discover it's not a cessation of experience.
Would you say that you're talking from a connection with the this?
talking is from a connection of this. and there is no talking. The talking is this.
I knew I could do this.
Well, you don't need to use a time concept, you don't need to use a space concept, you don't need to use any concepts. But when you don't use any of the concepts, nothing goes away, does it? No. Or comes in, for that matter. Nothing comes, nothing goes. So that shows how much these concepts, or how little these concepts have to do with reality.
There's almost this automatic thing that flows it into conceptualization.
Right.
And then the conceptualization wants to bark up, oh, I know it now.
You can write a book on it. Get a lucrative career going. And yet the conceptualization and this spontaneous urge to conceptualization is this. What else could it be? And conceptualization is not conceptualization, it's this. Direct experience is not direct experience, it's this. So all of that game is more fantasy.
I thought you were going to say, all that game is more this.
And full fantasy is this. So
Is ignorance and stupidity this?
where else could it come from? What else could it be made of?
So there's no way to go from stupid or ignorant to enlightenment or awake.
Of course not.
There's nothing.
Because both of those are imputations, neither of which exists. There is no stupid, there is no ignorant, there is no enlightened, there is no awake. There's just this. And yet, paradoxically, seeing that fact nakedly and clearly may be what's called enlightenment. But it's actually not anything different than this.
Thank Jesus.
That's what I say. Well, how this seeing happens, how this, this relative freedom from the imposition of these concepts onto this happens, is mysterious. Because we can't really know how this is happening. We can't really know the mechanism. We can supply causal models and these sorts of things, but we can't know that they're true, and that's more conceptualization. So we're throwing more concepts on. It's like throwing gasoline on a fire, right? So, but we can notice empirically that it does seem to happen that these kinds of realizations can occur, and it also does seem to happen that these kinds of realizations can occur more often and for longer duration, and possibly even for unlimited duration. But in terms of trying to understand why, or even how, ultimately it's a mystery. And yet we can address it empirically in ways that are maybe less than accurate, but possibly useful. Which is what I suggest is, as often as possible, in whatever way, using whatever tricks you seem to stumble on or gain access to, try to notice your direct experience, which is, by its very nature, non-conceptual. Notice the light in your field of vision. Notice the texture of sound. Notice the texture of thought. In other words, the actual present energies of your experience, rather than the conceptual differentiation and analysis of what those experiences are. In other words, experience thought without saying I'm thinking, just the presence of what this mysterious field of experience is. Experience vision without thinking of it as vision. In other words, try to go to your the naked raw energy of your experience in consciousness as directly as you can. And by doing so, you will be outside the realm of conception.
All right, so that confused me a little bit.
Well, look and see for yourself. Just even if I say it, doesn't mean you have to buy it.
Yeah.